The Cow Off the Cliff. Once upon a time, a wise man and his disciple were wandering through the countryside. They had been walking for a long time and were very tired and thirsty and hungry when they came upon a little house. And the wise man said, "Let's stop here. Let's ask them if they have anything, if they can help us." The disciple said, No. I mean, we can tell that the people who live here are desperately poor. I mean, look at that. The house is falling down. The garden in front is full of weeds, and they won't have anything, not even for themselves. How will they be able to share anything with us? The wise man just smiled at the disciple and said, let's ask anyway. So the disciple had his misgivings, but he knew that the wise man, was wise. That's why he was following him. And so followed him up. The wise man knocked on the door. The door nearly fell in. And quickly, the door was opened by a woman who was dressed in rags. And her hair was all disheveled, and there were bags under her eyes, and she was so thin. And the disciple thought, oh my goodness, I wish we had something to give them. And some little children came out, and they were skinny and starving, and a man came out too, and you could see that he was limping. And the disciple said, sorry, we didn't mean to bother you. It's all right, we'll keep going. But the wise man just said, wait. And the woman said, no, please. We can tell that you're travelers. We don't have much, but we were just about to sit down to eat. Come join us. Now the disciple felt terrible, but the wise man walked right in, made himself at home, sat down at the table, and the woman served them a very small potato. That was all they had, and a glass of milk. And he noticed that the woman and the man didn't eat anything at all. They had given them all their supper. Well, the disciple ate just a tiny little bit, and he watched the children stare at his piece hungrily. And he slowly, wanted to give the rest of the potato to the kids, but the wise man looked at him and he ate it. And the wise man started chatting with the man and the woman, asking them how things were going. They told him, oh, it's terrible. We're always sick, and you see that the roof is leaking and everything, but thank God for the cow. Oh, we have our one cow, and she is what keeps us from starving. It's all we have, but she gives us a little bit of milk, and we can sell that milk, and that helps us get by day, just one day at a time. But thank God for that cow. What would we do without that cow? Ah, said the wise man. Very nice. That night, the man and the woman went to sleep in a corner of the room next to the fire, and they let the wise man and the disciple sleep in the bed. Now the disciple tossed and turned all night. He felt terrible. He wished he had something to give them, but he didn't. And in the morning, very early, while all the family was still asleep, the wise man said, come on, get up. The disciple jumped up and thought, yes, let's go before they give us breakfast, because then they're not going to eat anything at all, these poor people. And the wise man stepped carefully over the sleeping family, went out of the collapsing door, and went to the little stables where the cow was. That cow was skinny. The cow looked miserable. The cow barely got enough to eat either. And very carefully, the wise man untied the cow and said, all right, let's go. And he started taking the cow away. But the disciple thought, well, maybe he knows something that I don't. Maybe he's going to go and exchange the cow for a better one or something, and he's going to help the family. And so he continued after the wise man. But they weren't going to the town. The wise man led him all the way up to a cliff. And once they got to the cliff, the wise man said, "Moo! Moo! 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 Moo!" The disciple thought, well, maybe he knows something that I don't. Maybe he's going to go and exchange the cow for a better one or something, and he's going to help the family. And so he continued after the wise man. But they weren't going to the town. The wise man led him all the way up to a cliff. And once they got to the cliff, the wise man said, and the cow died. Now, just so you know, this is a story, and no real cows were harmed in the making of this tale. Close parenthesis. But anyway, the disciple stared at the wise men, and finally he couldn't stand it anymore and said, "What have you done? The poor family is going to starve to death. The cow was the only thing that was keeping them alive. How could you have done? They were so nice to us." And he kept screaming at the wise men. And the wise men just smiled and said, "You'll see." So the wise men turned around and walked away. But the disciple couldn't stand it. He said, "No, if you're going to be like that, I'm not following you anymore." And the disciple went off into the world. He felt like he had a debt to pay, and he worked as hard as he could and saved as much money as he could. He wanted to go back to the family to bring them something, to apologize for that cow. Finally, a year later, he'd made enough money to buy a brand new cow, and he went back with a heavy heart, wondering whether he would find the family at all, whether the children would have died of hunger, what was going on. And he came to the run-down little house, and it wasn't there anymore. Some new family must be living there. And with a heavy heart, he realized that they were probably kicked out if they couldn't pay for the rent or whatever, and who knows where they are. And he went and knocked on the house. At least maybe the people there would know what had happened to the family. And this beautiful young woman opened the door and welcomed him in. And she looked very nice and was wearing a brand new dress. And he said, "Excuse me, do you know?" "Oh, you!" And the woman hugged him tightly. And he said, What? He said, "Yes, you're the disciple, aren't you?" "Wait, you're the woman that we met a year ago?" Yes, please come in. Oh, we have so much to tell you." And he went in, and there was a brand new table, and there was food on it. The family was just about to sit down to dinner, and all the children were wearing new clothes, and they were carrying their school books, and the father had all these tools, and there was a big garden in front, and it's like, "What happened?" And the woman said, "Well, it's a funny story, actually. But our luck started changing since your visit. And we know it must have been because that wise man pronounced some sort of blessing on us. We don't know what it was. But anyway, it's a funny thing. After you left, our cow disappeared. I don't know what happened. She must have gotten away. It was a very old rope that we were tying her with. And we found her finally at the bottom of a cliff. She died. And it was tragic, and we didn't know what we were going to do, and we went hungry for a while, but since we didn't have that cow anymore, we had to make ends meet somehow. And so I went into the town and I started getting laundry, and I would wash it by hand, and my daughters would help me. And my husband, well, he started cutting wood and selling it in town, and my daughters decided to plant a garden. And eventually we started growing some things, and we were able to sell it. And little by little, we all worked together, and we all pulled together. And look at us now. We were able to fix up the house. Our kids are going to school now, and they're really smart, and they're learning so much, and so that's helping them as well. My oldest son has gotten a job, and now I have a whole business doing laundry, and we have our garden. We have all these things. That cow, believe it or not, was holding us back, because she was giving us just enough to survive day by day, and we had no time at all to even think of anything else. Losing that cow was the best thing that could have happened to us. "Really?" said the disciple. "Huh." And he ate with the family, and he slept on a brand new bed, and in the morning he went out, and he decided to look for the wise man, to follow him again. Now the real question is, what cow do you need to throw off a cliff right now?